We've just heard that exemption is up from 5,000 to 20,000. It's gone up 4 times, exemption on gift tax. The flat rate, there's going to be a flat rate of 30% on the value of gifts. And there's something which Bimal will explain on the aggregation of provision for gifts has been deleted. Secondly, on valuation of gifts, apparently it's going to be made much simpler. There are going to be simpler rules for jewelry and shares for the valuation of this. Preemptive right of the government. Oh, this is an interesting thing which is being implemented. The government has the right to acquire properties above 10 lakhs in cities without question. It has a preemptive right. Bimal, could you explain this bit about gift tax?
Yes, I think this is a very major reform which was mentioned in the fiscal policy statement. I mean, you would recall that Finance Minister had said that he wants to retain the gift tax, even though the state duty had been abolished, because this helps him to check on income tax payments. Now, I think what he has done is a major reform of the whole gift tax system. I mean, you would recall that gift tax, really a lot of criticism was made about gift tax, including, I think, the LK Jha's report on the Economic Administration Reforms Commission, saying that you are raising only about 10 crores. So why all this fuss? And it was an act running into a couple of 100 pages and so on and so forth. So what he has done now, that he has really reduced the whole act, Gift Tax Act, to 3 or 4 lines.
I see. So it's basically a major simplification on the gift tax.
A major simplification, and the rates have been so designed that you really cannot escape income tax by gifting. You know, I mean, that is the important point. That
we're
major simplification.
We're getting a part of the second part of the speech, and we have Mr. LK Jha with us, and I'd just like to get his reactions to the budget so far, overall, and plus some of these specific proposals on gift tax and company tax. Part A is this, and Part B, the 2 parts of the budget.
Well, I think so far as the tax side is concerned, on direct taxation, one of the promises being fulfilled is that as the value of money keeps going down, you will have to make adjustments. And therefore, the limits are being raised for exemption. 5,000 rupees when it was fixed is equal to about 20,000 rupees now. So it is not a relief, but a recognition of a real change in the value of the rupee. Otherwise, they have kept in with the projections made in the long-term fiscal policy. The rationale has been spelled out. And also, I believe it will lead to a simplification in procedures. People should pay taxes, but their patience should not be taxed, their energy should not be taxed, and some of the changes made are of a nature which would simplify the process of tax collection.
But can I come in and ask you another question? You're quite right that prices have gone up, and for the man on the street, prices should keep in touch with inflation. All deductions should keep in touch with inflation, I'm so sorry. But equally, a rupee is equally difficult now, in fact more difficult for the government to raise that extra rupee. Now, with these deductions, which many of us would welcome from the personal point of view, from the point of view of efficiency, could you give us a leader in terms of how much more difficult it would be to mobilize resources? Expenditures are up a lot. Direct taxes have more or less followed the long-term fiscal policy. Where do we raise the resources from?
Well, the experience of this year has disproved the concept that a higher rate of tax gives you more revenue. Now, it is, as it was, the gift tax was giving a paltry sum of money. It was justified merely as an instrument of preventing tax evasion. So it is not a source of revenue. Now, that purpose will be better fulfilled with a lower rate, and it is my expectation that with lower rates, the actual realizations may show an improvement and take capital gains. It's quite possible that with the lower rates, there will be much more realistic announcement of the selling price and much less of the various subterfuges, including black money payments, which have been widespread. So like the reduction in income tax rates meant more revenue, the reduction in capital gains tax may well be beneficial to the revenue.
Mr. Jha, you are a very busy man. But would you just hang on for a minute? Let's go to Prannoy. As soon as they come in with indirect taxes, once indirect taxes start, we'll come back to you once again, because that's where you are an expert on.
All right.
Well, we've been having a number of bits of information coming in, and as I mentioned earlier, it is probably a record speech in the length of time it's taken. Perhaps, well, I wonder if the second half is going to be much shorter than the first, because the first was so packed with information that I think the finance minister is still talking, and normally finance ministers would have stopped about an hour ago, or an hour and 5 minutes, maybe by about 6 o'clock. But the speech perhaps is still going. I'm not sure. We haven't heard, but from all information is still going on. We do have, if I can just recap the latest bit of information on gift tax. We have 3 proposals here. The exemption has gone up, exemption limit from 5,000 to 20,000. But as Mr. Jha has just said, a lot of that is compensates for inflation. The flat rate is now 30% on value, and the aggregate provision for gifts deleted. Now, this means that earlier on, gifts each year used to be added up, and there was a limit to it. Now it's not added up from year to year. Am I right, Vimal?
Yes. I mean, this is a major simplification. You know, formerly what used to happen was that if you gave something to your wife, you were allowed to give 50,000 in the entire lifetime. Now, so some chap somewhere has to keep a record of what Mr. Roy was doing, you know, throughout his life in terms of, you know, reaching that 50,000.
Or what your wife gave to you.
Or what your wife gave to you. Now, so
Excuse
this
me,
is
I've just got a budget flash, actually. This is, will be interesting for most of our viewers. For salaried employees, this is on personal income tax, the standard deduction has gone up from 6,000 to 10,000. That's 4,000 people, 4,000 rupees extra for salaried earners only. I think it's just come on the screen from 25% personal income tax. Yes. There's something else just coming in. We've just heard also that the speech has just been finished, but there's a little time between information coming in and a lag between what happens there and what happens here, given our normal communication problems. But we have personal income tax, another bit of information, medical insurance premium for non-CGHS users, deduction has now been allowed. Could you expand on that a little bit, Bimal, and give us information?
Well, I think what is proposed here is that for those who do not benefit from government scheme or who are really not government employees, that you would have some kind of a scheme which will enable you to deduct insurance payments for medical insurance taken out from GIC. I mean, that's also another relief for the common man, as it were.
Suman?
But the standard deduction is major.
Suman, are you a common man and salaried employee, and is this going to affect you?
If Mr. Singh, if Mr. VP Singh is not listening, I'd rather not say. But yes, the standard deduction is going to help everybody. That much more disposable income. I think it's in recognition of the very same thing that Mr. Jha was saying, that
Lakshmi, we
inflation has
noticed
taken a
one
toll.
thing about this. This is for salaried employees. It's not basically for all income earners. It's for salaried people. Is this a recognition that? Am I right there?
Yes, it is for salaried salaried employees, because the rest of them get their expenses deducted anyway.
I see.
If you're a professional person.
I see. That's the rationale behind it.
That's right.
Or is it that you recognize that salaried employees are very faithful payers of tax?
No, I think that is that recognition also, that you are not able to shift the burden of any additional, cost.
I mean,
of living
expenses
increase
are,
and so on.
much more difficult to monitor.
Yeah, of course.
Would you welcome such a step?
Yes, but as Mr. Jha has pointed out, much of what we are doing is rationalizing the inflation.
Yes.
That
yes.
6,000 has become archaic in the given cost. So 10,000 today has the same value as 6,000 had some years ago.
We're getting a lot of information now coming in, which will be coming on the screen about excise duties, etc. And apparently, mod VAT is being introduced in a big way, and we'll be coming to that shortly, and we'll be discussing it with you. But as just getting back to this standard deduction going up on salaried employees from 6 to 10,000, is that when was 6,000 fixed? Is that just compensating for inflation?
No, I think it's more than that, because my recollection is 6,000 was last year, or maybe before. I mean, it was either last year or the year before. So by raising it from 6 to 10, I mean, it's quite a major concession to the salaried.
We've got some more information now, if I can get back on indirect taxes. This is excise duties, what is known in the jargon as indirect taxes, excise taxes. Mod VAT, not Mad VAT, has been introduced, as Bimal has just told me, it's not Mad VAT, has been introduced in 37 specified chapters of excise tariff. Now, we don't know which one these are, but there are a large number of them. And there's new excise concessions for the small-scale industry sector, I believe. Bimal, could you tell us a few more details on these, which give some examples of industries or which is the small-scale sector? I just heard, did I mention this earlier, that the finance minister has sat down. I did mention it earlier. So you can now say anything without any trouble about leaking the budget.
I won't take your word for it.
Could you tell us a little more about which of these 37?
Yes, on the, you see, mod VAT, I mean, this is, I think, for the viewers, it should be explained what it is. I mean, this is the value-added tax, about which a lot has been written, a lot has been spoken. And I think Mr. Jha, who is with us, is an authority on this.
Yes, we must get to Mr. Jha on this very shortly, because I think it is his original conception, actually.
That's right. In 1976, I think, or 77,
yes,
that he had first asked for it. And now this has been implemented in 86 by the present finance minister. The main thing of benefit here is that, this what is called tax on tax, that if you bought some inputs, if you bought compressor or you bought something and put into a refrigerator, now that refrigerator paid tax on that compressor which had already paid tax, and also there was a duty on the refrigerator. Now what is being done here, I mean, I do not know whether refrigerator is included or not, by the way. This is purely as a matter of illustration. That what is being done here.
Surely you do know, you're not letting on.
No. I'm not an expert on this line at all.
Okay.
But so what is being done here now is to say that the tax, the excise duty, would be levied only on that part of it which you yourself manufacture.
There's another budget latest, if I could just interrupt, Bimal. We have a budget latest which says that special excise duties on 32 items have been removed altogether. And there is a new package of incentives for edible oils. I think this ties up with what the finance minister was saying earlier about about a lot of imbalances in cropping pattern, and that we need to boost our domestic production of certain kinds of things that we are currently importing. Now, can we go back to this special excise duty on 32 items?
Yes, that is a continuation of the reform that he had started last year. You see, we have a number of different kinds of excise duty on the same product. I mean, 5% of this, 2% of that, 2.5% of something else, and so on and so forth. There is a reason for each of these.
I see.
What finance minister had announced last year was that he would try to do some simplification. I mean, all simplification in our system is really not possible, because you have the states, some taxes which are shared with the state, some which are not shared with states, and so on and so forth. But this, now at least there would be one less entry in the ledger books, so far as the special excise.
It's basically a kind of simplification.
Yes, this is simplification. I think most of
will there be a revenue? Will there be revenue loss involved? I mean, is it a concession?
No. I mean, I think that. I'm not quite sure on that point. You may be surprised, but this is.
We're not letting on again.
How much simplification is involved in all these? How much are we getting rid of?
You see, I mean, I would say that on the direct tax side, for example, what he has announced on the gift tax and the capital gains, these I would, as an economist, I would regard them as very major simplification exercises, that you really would know what is your tax liability without having to go to your tax consultant, which is a major gain, and without having to have a dispute with the income tax.
Not for tax consultants.
Not for, well,
no, they will have other business anyhow.
But
can I just get to Mr. Tandon? I just want to ask you something about mod VAT before we go across to Mr. LK Jha. By mod VAT, does it mean that at each stage of inputs into the final product, where people used to be paying excise duties at each stage, it's now all that those people don't have to pay excise duty anymore, and it's going to come to it's going to be all levied at the end, or they're going to be only paid on whatever the value, they're going to pay, only going to pay taxes on the value added in their product?
This is a question I wanted to ask Bimal.
Go ahead.
Bimal, will it mean that it will abolish the cascading effect of duties?
Precisely.
I see. Well, that I think is greatly welcome. Because
Tarun, how do you welcome this?
I think that's very good, and we've been looking forward to this simplification which was mentioned in the LTFP, and I hope that in this list of products steel is included.
And how does it, I mean, just give me an example, an everyday example. How does mod VAT help you rather than, as opposed to excise
Well, if
duty?
this concept, as I understand it, I mean, if you take automobile industry, there are many components, there are raw materials, there are different stages of processing, and this applies to all engineering industry. And I think you're paying tax at every level, at every stage. And mod VAT, I think, should
I'd
get
like to
away
go
from
to
that.
LK Jha shortly, actually, as soon as we can get the cameras organized. They have to be swung around. But
I'll give you an example, if I may.
yes.
We did a study some years ago on refrigerators. And the cascading effect of the duty, where every compressor, steel going in, paint going in, had borne a duty already, came to 167% of the ex-works cost.
Good Lord.
Now, I hope
Good
this
Lord.
will simplify the pyramid effect of duties.
I see. Now, if we could just go to probably one of the country's real experts on this particular topic, mod VAT versus excise duty, and get an everyday man's view of it. If we could turn to LK Jha and get his views on this, please.
For viewers who've just tuned in now, I'd like to first start with a piece of news that the Finance Minister has introduced the modified value-added tax, which goes by the name of mod VAT. Sitting with me here is Mr. LK Jha, an expert on cascading effects of multi-point taxes. Now that they have introduced your scheme, Mr. Jha, do you feel relieved, satisfied, happy? It's been a long battle.
Yes, indeed, I'm very happy. And I should like its significance to be understood. It is not just cascading, but social justice suffers if you tax inputs. Let me give you an example. If you tax steel sheets, it affects not only the refrigerator, but also the galvanized iron sheets used for working class hutments. So by taxing the inputs, you hurt the rich and poor in a way you don't even realize. Now, originally, this practice was adopted because it was felt it is so much simpler to tax the inputs than finished products. But once you start taxing the finished products in their own right, there is no reason to tax the inputs except to guard against the danger and possibility that the inputs may be sold in their own right. For example, a battery goes into a car as a component. It's also sold as a replacement. So you want to keep the tax on, but to arrange that it does not fall on the car. Another point to remember is that when the tax is levied on the input, the manufacturer of the final product has to finance it by borrowings. So the increase in the final price is more than the revenue which comes to government because costs are raised.
Now, can I ask for a small clarification? In England, for instance, the value-added tax has been there for a very long time. It's called the VAT.
Yeah.
Now, what is the modified part which makes it mod VAT?
Well, what we had recommended from my committee was manufacturer's value-added tax, because it was meant for certain manufacturers only.
That was man VAT.
Man VAT.
Yeah.
Now, mod VAT is a modification of the VAT idea to suit Indian conditions. It's not going to extend to all the items, to a select range of items, and gradually spread. Now, the conditions in England are different in that there is one taxing authority. Here, we have got an interaction with the states also. There are many complications involved. So all I would say is that it is a modified form. We couldn't adopt the British model lock, stock and barrel. Secondly, it involves a fair amount of bookkeeping. That could not be easy for many of our producers.
May I ask one last question? Something that Bimal chose not to speak on when asked, I'd like to ask you. It's a very good idea to have value-added tax and tax at the end instead of continuously taxing all the way through. But the final question is, will the new tax be a lower burden on the commodity than the cascading effects? Now, if it is lower, how much revenue would one lose?
No, I think it would be more rationally distributed. I don't think the idea is to reduce the total tax burden. Now, take an example. on this insulin, which people take for diabetes drug. The nominal excise duty, when I looked into it, was only 2%. Oh, we can't tax it too much. But the actual taxation of it was 27%. Now, this was a fortuitous taxation without meaning to. So now you will have to aim at final rates of taxation, which will mean a more equitable spread of the burden rather than a reduction of the tax burden.
We now move on to Prannoy, who must be all agog with all sorts of news.
We do have some bits of budget latest, actually. It's, we've heard just now that excise duty, we've just got a graphic computer latest on that, excise duty has been reduced on 74 items of machinery in gems and jewelry. And all shoddy woolen blankets have been exempted from excise. Finally, we do have it just before the finance minister sat down. He gave us the budget deficit for this year. The budget deficit is to be, and we've just got it on the screen, 3,650 crores. That is about 3,000 crores higher than the budget estimate last year, but it is about 800 crores lower than the revised estimate for last year, if I'm right. Now, we are going to have a Hindi bulletin for 15 minutes, but all stations of Doordarshan should remain linked with us as we are coming back for a final roundup and a summing up of the budget so far. Over for Hindi bulletin.
नमस्कार। वित्त मंत्री श्री विश्वनाथ प्रताप सिंह ने आज संसद में अगले साल का जो आम बजट पेश किया, उसकी प्रमुख बातें इस प्रकार हैं। निश्चित आय वाले लोगों को राहत दी गई है। गरीबी दूर करने के कार्यक्रमों में बहुत अधिक वृद्धि की गई है। भविष्य निधि में ब्याज की दर बढ़ाई गई है। जीवन रक्षक दवाएं सस्ती हो जाएंगी। परिष्कृत मूंगफली का तेल और सरसों का तेल महंगा हो जाएगा। उत्पादन शुल्क को युक्तिसंगत बनाने की नई योजना शुरू की जाएगी। लघु उद्योग क्षेत्र को और रियायतें दी जाएंगी और रंगीन टीवी सेट, एयर कंडीशनर और कारें जैसी ऐशो आराम की कुछ चीजें महंगी हो जाएंगी। धनकर का हिसाब लगाने के लिए नियम आसान बनाए जा रहे हैं। दानकर में छूट की सीमा बढ़ाई जा रही है। इसके अतिरिक्त योजना का व्यय और राज्यों को मिलने वाला हिस्सा बढ़ाया जा रहा है। वेतन से होने वाली आय में से मानक कटौती 25% से बढ़ाकर 30% और इसकी सीमा 6,000 रुपये से बढ़ाकर 10,000 रुपये कर दी जाएगी। इस उपाय से निश्चित आमदनी वाले 3.5 लाख करदाताओं को लाभ होगा। वित्त मंत्री ने कहा कि हालांकि कुछ वेतनभोगी लोगों को उनके मालिकों द्वारा चिकित्सा सुविधाएं दी जाती हैं, लेकिन बहुत से व्यक्ति स्वयं ये सुविधाएं प्राप्त करते हैं। ऐसे वेतनभोगी और अपना धंधा चलाने वाले लोगों को आयकर का हिसाब लगाते समय अपनी आय में से डॉक्टरी खर्च और दवाइयों का खर्चा घटाने की भी व्यवस्था की जा रही है। लॉटरी आदि से होने वाली आय पर 40% की समान दर से कर लगेगा। आकस्मिक और अनावर्ती किस्म की आय की छूट की सीमा को 1,000 रुपये से बढ़ाकर 5,000 रुपये किया जा रहा है। वर्ग पहेलियों, खेलों या घुड़दौड़ और लॉटरियों की जीत से अर्जित आय को अन्य आमदनी में शामिल नहीं किया जाएगा। दान कर को युक्तिसंगत बनाने के उद्देश्य से छूट की सीमा 5,000 से बढ़ाकर 20,000 रुपये की जा रही है। इस समय मकान किराया भत्ता पाने वाले व्यक्तियों तथा निःशुल्क आवास पाने वाले व्यक्तियों के बीच करदेयता में जो असमानता है, उसे समाप्त करने के लिए आवश्यक संशोधन किया जा रहा है। अब उस मकान की जिसमें मालिक स्वयं रहता है, काल्पनिक आमदनी को करों के लिए हिसाब में लिया जाता है। इस काल्पनिक आय को कर से छूट दी जा रही है। वित्त मंत्री ने छोटे उद्योगों के लिए उत्पादन शुल्कों में रियायतों की एक नई योजना शुरू करने की घोषणा की। लघु उद्योग क्षेत्र के लिए संयंत्र और मशीनों में निवेश की उच्चतम सीमा को भी 20 लाख रुपए से बढ़ाकर 35 लाख रुपए किया जा रहा है। वित्त मंत्री ने खाद्य तेलों के उत्पादन को प्रोत्साहन देने के लिए भी अनेक उपायों की घोषणा की है। समाज के निर्धन वर्गों के लाभ के लिए देशी तिलहन की पेराई से निकाले गए परिष्कृत वनस्पति तेलों को उत्पादन शुल्क से मुक्त किया जा रहा है, लेकिन महंगे परिष्कृत खाद्य तेलों पर 1,500 प्रति मीट्रिक टन के हिसाब से उत्पादन शुल्क लगाया जा रहा है। लेकिन नए परिष्कृत तेलों के उत्पादन को बढ़ावा देने के लिए सोयाबीन, चावल की भूसी, बिनोलों और सूरजमुखी के बीजों से निकाले गए परिष्कृत तेलों को इस लेवी से मुक्त रखा जाएगा। बजट में बचत को बढ़ावा देने के लिए भी कुछ उपाय किए गए हैं। सरकारी कर्मचारियों को भविष्य निधि पर मिलने वाली ब्याज की दर 10.5% से बढ़ाकर 12% कर दी गई है। जिन कर्मचारियों को कर्मचारी भविष्य निधि, कोयला खदान भविष्य निधि या दूसरे अधिनियमों के तहत भविष्य निधि की सुविधाएं प्राप्त हैं, उन्हें भी 11% की बजाय 12% की दर से ब्याज मिलेगा। निर्यात को प्रोत्साहन देने के लिए भी वित्त मंत्री ने अनेक उपायों की घोषणा की है। अनिर्मित तंबाकू को निर्यात शुल्क से पूरी तरह छूट दी जाएगी। सिगार, चुरुटों और सिगारिलों का निर्यात बढ़ाने के लिए ब्रांड नाम के सिगारों, चुरुटों और सिगारिलों पर से उत्पाद शुल्क पूरी तरह समाप्त करने का प्रस्ताव है। ब्रांड वाले हुक्के के तंबाकू पर भी उत्पाद शुल्क समाप्त किया जा रहा है। सिले सिलाई वस्त्र उद्योग को राहत दिलाने के लिए सामान्य शुल्क वापसी की दर 7.5% से बढ़ाकर 10% करने का प्रस्ताव है। लेदर शेविंग ब्लेडों पर से आयात शुल्क 72.5% की औसत दर से 40% किया जा रहा है। समुद्री उत्पादों को संसाधित करने और उन्हें पैक करने वाली मशीनों पर आयात शुल्क की मौजूदा दर 100% से घटाकर 40% की जा रही है। रत्न और आभूषण संबंधी मशीनों, उपस्करों और औजारों की 74 मदों के संबंध में आयात शुल्क को कम करके 25% मूल्यानुसार किया जा रहा है। कपड़े के उत्पादन को बढ़ावा देने के लिए हथकरघा संगठनों को सप्लाई होने वाले ब्लेंडेड पॉलिएस्टर सूती धागे और पॉलिएस्टर विस्कोस धागे को पूरी तरह शुल्क से मुक्त किया जा रहा है। वित्त मंत्री ने सभी प्रकार के शॉडी ऊनी उत्पादों को भी उत्पादन शुल्क से पूरी तरह मुक्त रखने का प्रस्ताव किया है। इनमें कंबल, चटाई का कपड़ा, शॉलें और अन्य कपड़े शामिल हैं। ऊनी वस्त्र उद्योग को राहत देने के उद्देश्य से कच्ची ऊन पर आयात शुल्क 40% से घटाकर 20% मूल्यानुसार करने का प्रस्ताव है, लेकिन बेकार ऊन और फटे पुराने ऊनी वस्त्रों पर आयात शुल्क 10% से बढ़ाकर 20% कर दिया जाएगा। 23 प्रकार की मध्यमवर्ती दवाओं को अतिरिक्त सीमा शुल्क से छूट देने का प्रस्ताव है। जीवन रक्षक 41 और औषधियों को भी उत्पादन शुल्क से मुक्त किया जा रहा है। इससे 1 करोड़ रुपए की राजस्व हानि होगी। आम व्यक्ति को राहत दिलाने के उद्देश्य से भी वित्त मंत्री ने कई घोषणाएं की। इनके अनुसार मिट्टी के तेल और लकड़ी से जलने वाले स्टोवों पर उत्पादन शुल्क समाप्त किया जा रहा है। जूतों पर उत्पाद शुल्क में पूरी छूट की सीमा 30 रुपए प्रति जोड़े से बढ़ाकर 45 रुपए प्रति जोड़ा की जा रही है। ब्रशों, कंघियों, छतरियों और इसी प्रकार की अन्य वस्तुओं पर से भी उत्पाद शुल्क समाप्त किया जा रहा है। समाचार पत्रों के लिए छपाई उपस्करों की 4 मदों पर सीमा शुल्क में कमी की जा रही है। 36 सेंटीमीटर से अधिक आकार के स्क्रीन वाले रंगीन टीवी सेट के मामले में उत्पादन शुल्क 900 रुपए से बढ़ाकर 1500 रुपए प्रति सेट करने का प्रस्ताव है। अपने साथ सामान के रूप में विदेश से लाने वाले टीवी सेटों पर भी अतिरिक्त सीमा शुल्क लगाने का प्रस्ताव है। एयर कंडीशनरों पर भी शुल्क बढ़ाने का प्रस्ताव है। 1.5 टन क्षमता वाले एयर कंडीशनरों पर 8000 रुपए प्रति एयर कंडीशनर की दर से और 1.5 से 3 टन तक की क्षमता वाले एयर कंडीशनरों पर 10,000 रुपए के हिसाब से शुल्क लगेगा। 7.5 टन की क्षमता वाले एयर कंडीशनरों पर 15,000 रुपए की दर से शुल्क लगेगा। वातानुकूलन मशीनों के हिस्से पुर्जों पर भी शुल्क बढ़ाया जा रहा है। सीमा शुल्क और उत्पादन शुल्क की दरें बढ़ाने और रियायतें देने के बाद 4 अरब 67 करोड़ 22 लाख रुपए की अतिरिक्त आय होगी। वित्त मंत्री ने कहा कि इस सारी आय के बाद अगले वर्ष के बजट में 36 अरब 50 करोड़ रुपए का घाटा रह जाएगा, जिसके लिए कोई व्यवस्था नहीं की गई है। श्री सिंह ने कहा कि हमारी अर्थव्यवस्था के आकार और मुद्रा भंडार को देखते हुए ये घाटा विवेक सम्मत और गैर मुद्रास्फीतिकारी है और पिछले साल के घाटे से कम है। समाज के कमजोर वर्गों के लोगों की भलाई के लिए वित्त मंत्री ने अनेक कार्यक्रमों में अतिरिक्त धन देने की घोषणा की। ग्रामीण विकास कार्यक्रम, राष्ट्रीय ग्रामीण रोजगार कार्यक्रम आदि योजनाओं पर अगले साल 65% अधिक धन दिया जाएगा। अनुसूचित जातियों और जनजातियों के लिए आवास कार्यक्रम को भी मजबूत बनाया जाएगा। श्री सिंह ने घोषणा की कि अनुसूचित जातियों और अनुसूचित जनजातियों के लिए इंदिरा आवास योजना के नाम से एक नया कार्यक्रम शुरू किया जाएगा। नगर पालिकाओं के सफाई कर्मचारियों और रेलवे कुलियों के लाभ के लिए दुर्घटना बीमा की एक नई योजना शुरू की जाएगी। योजना खर्च में राज्यों को अब 21% अधिक भाग मिलेगा। सूचना और प्रसारण मंत्रालय के नियत धन में 120% की बढ़ोतरी की गई है। इसके साथ ही विशेष समाचार बुलेटिन समाप्त हुआ। नमस्कार।
I'll just add on to what was said in the news bulletin. Basically, we were talking earlier about export duties, and we have actually just received the speech finally straight from Parliament. But before I go into it, we were talking about problems of exports and imports, particularly on capital goods imports. We find that customs duties have gone up enormously. That's basically a way to tackle, I guess, the problem of trade deficit. There's a major edible oil package which we shall just go into, but the main object is to be here for another 5 or 10 minutes to do a summing up, which I shall ask each of the panel of the overall thrust of the budget and some of the details. But, so if we start with Lakshmi Jain actually has a flight to catch, so it's lucky that we have him here at all. He's going off in about half an hour somewhere else. This budget speech has gone longer than ever before. I think I'd like to look into the records, but I'm sure it's some kind of a record. That's another record the finance minister has created. But can I just ask you, Lakshmi, before you fly off, from literally, a quick summing up of this budget?
Well, firstly, it is a development-oriented budget, and there are many interesting features. So it's not a dull budget by any means. That's one. I also hope that every rupee that has been budgeted will go as long as the budget speech has gone in terms of the efficiency of the use of the resources that have been given. I have not yet got a clear